Check this out, $150 on the top column and $100 on black. That's $250 per spin. This system is called Ploppy 32, and I first saw it on Casino Matchmaker's channel, and I'm going to link to that video in the description below. But I was curious, how much money could you really win using this system? Here's the experiment I set up. I programmed 100,000 bots. They're going to start with a $1,000 bankroll, and that's going to be 4 tries at $250 per spin. The bots are going to stop if they win just $350 or if they lose enough so they can't make any more bets. My name is Matt, and I run simulations of craps and roulette systems. You may know me from my other channel, Dice Data. If this kind of thing is interesting to you, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video. That helps me reach a lot more people who are interested in simulations. Before we get into the data, let's see how the strategy works by replaying one of the bot's sessions. We get our bet set up with $150 on the top column, $100 on black. Let's see how we do.
32 red.
All right, 32, we got whacked. We lost both of them. Our profit now is down $250.
36 red.
All right, that time we won. We lost $100 on black, but we did win the top column. So we netted $200. That brought our profit down to a loss of $50.
19 red.
This time was a whack. Our profit's now negative $300.
34 red.
Another whack.
9 red.
All right, there we go. We won $300 on that top column. We lost the $100 on the black, so that's going to be another net of $200.
33 black.
All right, and there we got our first jackpot. So we won $300 up top. We won $100 there, netted $400. We're finally in profit again, $50 in profit. Remember, we're trying to get to $350 in profit, then we're going to stop.
15 black.
All right, great. We got another one, and that did it. So that got us to $400 win because we won on both of those bets. Profit was $450, and that's where the bot is going to stop. So what would happen if we did that 100,000 times? That's what the simulation report is going to show us. So this is a simulation report that I generated. This is what you get when you order a custom simulation from me. The report has a lot of information, but I'm not going to go over it all today. If you are interested in reading the full report, I make it available to my Think Tank subscribers. Just go to thinktank.dicedata.info. You can learn more and sign up, and you'll get access to this report, all my roulette reports, and my craps reports as well. Here are the simulation parameters. So I ran all 3 wheel types, 100,000 bots on each. Came out to be, anywhere north of 560,000 spins on each individual wheel. First, we'll look at the house metrics. The bots wagered about $142 million. Anywhere from $77 to $82 million won, $88 to $86 million lost. That's a house take, which definitely a big difference between the different wheel types, but 2.68% on the single zero, that's right in line with the theoretical, which is 2.7%. And you can see, of course, the double and triple zero increase from that. As the casino adds more zeros, it increases their edge. On the single zero, I'd rate that as moderate. Elevated on the double zero, substantial on the triple zero. Triple zero is an expensive one. We're going to see that throughout the report. Remember how we defined a session. So we said a session is the bot's going to play until they either win $350 or they lose enough that they can't continue on. Well, how many of them ended up winning money? 32.4% on the single zero, 31% on the double zero, and less than 30% on the triple zero. But what's more important than how often they won is how much they won. And this session profit and loss is going to show us that. Let me zoom in here just a little bit. So what do we have here? Well, we have a typical amount. So that's the median. 50% did better, 50% did worse. That's an $800 loss across the board. So typically this is a losing strategy. Now, how about the most likely, the middle 50%? Well, if you're lucky on that side, anywhere from a win of $400 to a win of $350, depending on the wheel type, and losses up to 950 to 1000 if they're on the unlucky side. So this is the boundary of the middle 50% of sessions. 50% of the bots are in between these numbers. What if we expand that? If we went out to 90% of the numbers? Well, 90%, the very luckiest, that 95th percentile, is a win of $550 or $500, depending on the wheel. And of course, a loss of everything up to $1,000, which was the maximum that they could do. The full range is anywhere from a win of $700 up to a loss of $1,000. Now, one of the things about the strategy is it's very lopsided in its wins and losses. And look at this. If we look here, let me zoom right in. On the single zero, the average loss when the bots lost was almost $900, but the average win when they won was only $429. So you see this big gap between the wins and the losses. And because of that, we get a pretty low rating, just 1 stars. The average losses are much larger than the average wins with the strategy. So this is something that you always want to know before you go in with a particular betting strategy. Are you putting more at risk to win less, or is it the opposite? This is a tough one. It's going to be hard for us to really get ahead with this strategy, and we're going to see that a few more times later in the video. Here's the strategy risk profile. So this is where we compare how often the bots won versus how much they won on the y-axis. And you can see that we have all our bets here with that about 30%, sometimes a little bit under 30% on the 000. Those bots are right here, and then they line up with about 50%. So they're going to win about 50% of what they're actually putting at risk. So it puts down here in this weak return section. And I don't know. I think this strategy is going to have a tough time of being something that I would really recommend. Here are what some of the typical sessions look like. So typically, we saw before, it's a loss of about $800. So you can see how this bot went down that far. The unlucky bots go down all the way to 1,000 in both cases, whether they're lucky or very unlucky. The average still follows a little bit of that trend line, but definitely ends down. Once you get into the lucky territory, that's that win of $450. And the very lucky had a win, going up to the $500, $550, I think it was on the previous table. Here are the outcomes on individual spins. We're going to hit a jackpot 10.8% of the time. So that's when we have one of these black numbers at the top, whether it's the 6, the 15, the 24, or the 33. Those are, we're going to win both at the top column and on black. So that's where this 10% comes from. The wins about 30% of the time, loses the rest of the time, and about a third of the time, total whack, no wins whatsoever with this strategy. On a per spin basis, the magnitudes actually reverse. So in this case, when the bots won, we'll look at single zero, $267 that they won when they won, $138 they lost when they lost. So what happens is it's going to reverse on individual spins, but because we have the win goal set at $350, it's very hard for the bots. They're not going to ever win a whole lot of money because they're going to quit while they're ahead. Here's the analysis of consecutive streaks. Most of the time, it's just going to be one single win. But 26% of the time, we had 2 wins in a row. 6% of the time, we had 3 wins in a row. And then they really dropped off when we get to 4, 5, 6. Those are the ones where they actually started to go down, but then they were able to claw their way back to profit and get up to that $350 win level. So we're going to see some examples of that later in the report. Here's the analysis of consecutive losses. 18% had no losses whatsoever. That climbed to a maximum of 34% at the 4 losses. So a lot of times they just, lost 4 times in a row and were never able to recover from that. And just a few of them had losses of 5 in a row. Bankroll tells us how much the bots needed out of their own pocket to play the strategy. So we did say that the bots had a maximum of $1,000 out of their own pocket, but they didn't always need it. In fact, typically they only needed $850 to play the strategy. If they were lucky in that middle 50%, they only needed $500. If they were very lucky, they only needed $250. That was to make that original bet. They always have to make that original bet to be able to play the game, and then they were able to win from there and never had to outlay any additional money. The return on outlay tells us if the bots were able to multiply that outlay. About just over 1 out of 5 of them were able to double their money. Just a small amount, just over 2% were able to triple their money. And none of them were able to quadruple or 5x or 10x their money. And that makes sense because we set the win goal to $350. And because there's a win goal, they're never going to continue playing enough to really maximize their overall return based on their outlay. And similarly, pretty much the same reason, the betting power is extremely limited. It's very minimal. So for every $100 that they outlay, they're only making $188 or so in bets. This really matters if you're a player that really wants to get a lot of comps or wants a lot of time at the table, who's really trying to have some long sessions, get some free drinks at the casino. Since this is a low number, you wouldn't want to play exactly this way if you are that type of player. So what is this going to earn in comps? The bots had rated action of $1,250 typically. That's basically the coin in the sum of all the bets that they're making. And their session theoretical loss for that is $33 on the single zero wheel, $65 on the double zero wheel, and 94, almost $100 on the triple zero wheel. So you can see the difference in what the casino actually expects to make. Now, what the casino is actually going to give you for this is going to be different. Here, I showed daily theoretical loss if you played this strategy for 4 hours at 30 spins per hour. I would not recommend doing that because this is kind of like one and done strategy. And when you're going to play this strategy repeated times, it is going to really eat your bankroll. So here's some information about the playing experience and this hit frequency analysis. This just looks at how often do we win any bet on a spin. And these cover about 70% of the numbers. So you see that there's a 70.3% hit frequency on the single zero. Of course, that drops on the other table types. The opposite of that is the loss frequency. So how often did the bots lose just one bet? And you can see that being almost 90%. Here, almost 90% of the spins, the bots lost at least one bet. There is a little bit of hedging in this. So there's cases where you're going to win one bet and lose the other. That happened almost 60% of the time. Volatility here is moderate. Most of the swings are only about 85% of the typical bet. Our next section is profit retention. So this talks about how often the bots were able to stay in profit or recover from their losses. So roughly 17% of the bots were profitable the entire time. They started up and they hit that win goal, never having lost any money during their session. 45 up to 48% were down the entire time. So they lost right away, were never able to recover. 14.6 down to about 13% were recovered. So they started off going down, then they recovered. We're going to see that in a little bit. And about 22% gave back. So they ended up winning money and then ended up giving back their profits. Here's a deeper look at those recovered numbers. So the typical recovery was $250. The middle 50% is anywhere between $500 and $250. The middle 90% was anywhere from $750 to $50. So remember, they're going down and they keep recovering until they get to that $350 win goal. And then the full range is anywhere from $50 up to $750. This section shows some of those examples. So you can see right here, this is bot 96212. They started off going down, we're all the way down here, and then climbed back up. And you can see just some of the examples here. Look at this one, just kind of zigzags all the way up and down. This is bot 55707. Recovered $750 and ended up with a decent profit, almost $400 there. Here's the opposite side of that, profit given back. Typically, the bots gave back $200 in profit. If they were lucky, it was only $150. If they were very lucky, it was only $50. The full range is between $50 and $300 given back. It can't be more than that because they had that $350 win goal. So if they got to $350, they stopped, but $300 was the maximum where they didn't stop, but they ended up giving it back if they continued playing. Here are some of those examples. So you can see this one went down, got up, and then ended up losing pretty much the entire $1,000. And we see that story quite a bit. This person, this bot bought 1,184. Did pretty well and just kind of straddling the zero line, but then had a couple bad spins and ended up losing about $800 on that one. How long did their sessions last? Typically, the bots lasted just 5 spins. That's all they needed until they either exhausted their bankroll or they ended up hitting that win condition. The middle 50% is between 4 and 7. Middle 90% is between 1 and 13. Those ones, if they win right off the bat, they won $400, which means all they had to do was stop because they were already at that $350 win goal. The most was 30, and that's what I put in for the maximum. So there were some that actually kept straddling zero and just continued all the way up for 30 spins. Most of the money won and lost is going to be on those column bets. That's going to be 2/3. The rest of it is going to be on black. And that's because there's a lower amount on black, and black also returns a little bit less when it wins. It's just a 1-to-1 bet, whereas the column bet is going to be 2-to-1. So what if the bots actually return to the casino multiple times to play this strategy? That's what this session talks about. So we already saw on the one video that we had about a third of them, sometimes a little bit less depending on the zeros, were winning money. Now, what happens if they win 10 times? That winning amount falls to just 1.5% on that single zero and much lower on the triple zero. If they win 20 times, look at this, just 1 out of 1,000. And then once we get up to 50 and 500 times, none of them were able to keep a profit over those longer sessions. This chart shows the trajectory. So you can see just a little bit of wins way up here at the top, but after that, straight shot zero. And I'm going to show you actually some of these numbers because they're pretty crazy numbers once you get up to 500 visits. Let's look at a single zero because that's the most generous, right? So after one visit, we have $550 up to $1,000. That's what we saw earlier. After 10 visits, the very lucky group is $1,150 lost, up to $7,800 lost. Look what happens after 500 visits. $210,000 lost is very lucky. And if you're very unlucky, the very unlucky bots, $256,850 lost. So devastating range here. That's really the effect of the house edge and what happens with this particular strategy. So this is not something that you want to play over the long term. And now it's time for our TrueScore analysis, starting out with the single zero. Our house edge, moderate house edge, we get 3 stars here. This is going to go lower on the other ones. Profit and loss balance. So this is a loss grinder with limited upside potential. So what's happening is it's going to lose more often, and it's not winning enough to really recover from all of those losses. Volatility is moderate. Jackpot factor is capped partly because of our experiment design where we're having that $350 win goal. If we removed that, there might be some cases where you could have a jackpot, but it's still a really difficult strategy for you to recover your money. Betting power minimal, we saw that earlier. The money is going to vanish pretty quickly in this strategy. So who's it good for? Well, I don't know that I would recommend it really good for anybody. It gets 2 stars across the board for all 4 of our player personas. And bankroll requirements, just as we said, $1,000 is what's needed to play this strategy. We see very similar numbers on the other wheel types. So on 00, what happens is we lose a star on the house edge. Most everything is going to stay the same, and we're still ending up with the exact same numbers. When we get up to 000, now we got just a single star for the house edge. Comp grinder goes even lower, and we still at $1,000. So that's what I have for you today. I hope that you found this interesting because I want to give you more power so that you can really understand what is going to happen when you play these strategies. If you have a roulette strategy that you want me to simulate, I'm going to leave a link in the description below so you can submit it to me. I'll get it right on the channel, and I'm really looking forward to it. As always, thanks for watching and have good luck at the tables.